The Evans DB1 drum heads give you an 80% reduction in volume, but you need a specific setup to get the best tone from them. I'm here with Ben from Evans, and we're going to go through each of the elements individually, starting with the snare, going to the tom, and then quickly onto the kick drum. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Gear4music Drums, and let's jump straight into the snare. So the snare is going to be your defining sound behind the kit, and thanks to the snare sim on the DB1, we're going to show you how to get that crack and that snap that you can expect from an acoustic drum. And Ben is going to show us how. What's the starting point with this drum?
So the starting point is on the resonance side. So first and foremost, what we need to do is disengage, or in our case, we're going to remove the wires completely, and we're going to let the snare sim element of DB1 do the work that the snare wires do. Also, what we need to make sure of is that the resonant head is in tune with itself, and then we can get on with fitting the head. So quite simply, remove the wires, check the resonant side head, and then we can get on with setting up the actual batter side head. So we're going to make sure, the most important thing, if you're setting up any sort of drum with any sort of head, get the logo lined up with the logo. It's really important. Then what we'll do, we'll fit the counter hoop as we would with a standard polyester film drum head. And we're just going to locate all of the tension rods into the lug point, and then we'll tension this up to finger tight.
Okay.
Perfect. So we have every tension rod finger tightened just so it's pinching down onto the counter hoop, and what I'm going to do is throw a half turn from finger tight onto each of the tension rods, and we're going to work across the drum in the usual fashion. Again, just make sure that each of those tension rods is at finger tight, and as we tune down, some of these may become loose, so just start from finger tight and then add that half turn. Okay, so we've got half turn from finger tight. Now this is going to replicate what would be a lower tension drum. So you can hear the snare sim slightly more kind of buzzy, a little bit more fizzy sounding. So we can adjust that to our personal preference. Obviously it's all about feel at this point as well.
Yep.
So for me, I would throw a quarter turn to a half turn on top of what we've already done. But because we've got tension on, let's go with a quarter turn and see where that gets us. And again, just work across the tension rods. Okay, and let's see where we're at with that. So you can hear the wires becoming more articulate, a little bit more snappy. And the tone element is coming from the resonant side.
Yeah, starting to come alive a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of bright. It's got a little bit of overtone at the end. So if you want to back that off, you just adjust that from the resonant side. So set the wire sensitivity and also the feel from the batter side, and then you set the note or the tone from the resonant side. And it's as simple as that.
So the DB1 tom heads have a slightly different construction thanks to the kinetic transfer foam. So we're going to demonstrate how the foam interacts with the resonant head. Ben, how do you get the best tone from this head?
So with the tom heads, we've got to approach the drum setup from the resonant side first of all. The resonant head is essentially where all the tone is going to come from, and also that's going to dictate the note. So you kind of need to tune it in reverse to what you would usually apply to standard drum tuning. So basically we're going to check that the resonant head is in tune with itself and it's at the note that we want, and then from there we can set up the batter side with the DB1 head. So again, I'm just going to bring this one up just to make sure all these lug points are matched. And the key is that we want a nice clear note from that resonant side, and that will help us set up the DB1 head. And I'll explain a little bit about how that works. So we'll flip the drum over and we're going to focus on the batter side. So again, most importantly, get those logos straight, get them straight. And then we're going to get this up to finger tighten on all lug points. So not as many as the snare drum. Okay, so now we have our tension rods finger tightened onto the counter hoop. What we're going to do now is take the DB1 head up until we find the point in which the resonant head starts to kind of open up and sing. That's the whole point, and it's a very audible process. So it's not a case of us going around all the separate lug points, it's just a case of tapping, tuning, and listening until you hear it. And you can kind of hear there's a sweet spot where the resonant head opens up and you start to get that tone from the drum. If we go too high, it flattens and you kind of lose that fullness. So it's all about not going too heavy on the amount of turns on the tension rod. But when you hit that sweet spot, you will hear it. And taking the drum off a stand as well. Obviously for tuning purposes, we've got it on a snare basket, but you can hear the drum really open up when it's not being kind of grounded by the snare stand. And if I flatten it off, the drum goes flat again. So it's all about just dialing the drum in, and the tension that you set the batter head all depends on where you've set the resonant head. So the kind of legwork of this is the resonant head, and then you tune the DB1 until you get that full tone.
Got it.
Now that technique is also applied to any size tom across the kit.
Okay.
So this is a 10, obviously if it's a 16.
Just repeat the process.
Same process, exactly.
Perfect. So we've just gone over the snare and the toms, and the kick is the final drum that deserves the reduced volume treatment. What are we looking out for when putting this on?
DB1 kick drum head is the simplest head to set up on the kit. Obviously, we're looking for a more short sustained thud than a note that we'd be looking for on the tom head. So essentially all we need to do is make sure that we're happy with the note of the resonant head, which will dictate the overall tone of the sound. And just to mention, if you are using a vented head, obviously you'll get a shorter sustain and a shorter note. If you use a solid head, you'll get more kind of fullness to the tone. But it's similar to the tom head. You dictate kind of that note with the reso. And then from the batter side, what we're really looking for is the feel of it. So just to mention why we've got the head off the drum, the impact patch that we use on this particular element is aramid fibre, and it's got kind of a plasticky sort of laminate over the top of it, and that will add click and attack to your tone. That can also be moved depending on where your beaters are striking the head itself. So yeah, we'll get this on the drum, and it's just a simple case of taking it to finger tight and then having a listen to it. And you don't really need to go beyond finger tight. So again, we'll locate the head onto the bearing edge, we'll match the logo up with the badge, and then we'll take the hoop with the claws, and we'll get this set up and finger tighten it. Perfect. So now we've got the threads located, we'll just go around and we'll finger tighten each of the tension rods, and we'll just do the opposite lug technique just to make sure we remember where we are.
Okay.
Now we've got everything kind of down onto the hoop in terms of the claws and the tension rods. Little technique I like to use is having the drum on its side like this, and I just put a little bit of pressure on the hoop, and that just gives me a little bit more thread to tune onto, and that should get us to that perfect tension and feel. Like I said, a lot of the kick setup is actually in the feel of the head. Some people like a really sort of slack feeling bass drum head. Some people like it with a little bit more rebound. But in terms of the setup of that head, really what we need to do is just flip it and just bring it down and just see. And you can hear on the resonant head,
That's dictating the note.
that's dictating the note. The DB1 head is simply activating that resonant head.
Perfect.
And that's essentially how they work.
So there you have it, a nice quick overview on how to get the best setup from your DB1 drum heads from Evans. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've been Myles from Gear4music, and that's Ben from Evans. Thank you for watching.